Welcome back to these series of lectures on Western Civ. I'm going to introduce Greece today. This is a huge topic. In fact, a lot of teachers start this course with Greece. Greece is often looked at as sort of the foundation of Western civilization, sort of a model that Western civilization has followed. And you can see this in the conventions and traditions that we still follow today. If you think about political institutions, the very words democracy, republic, go back to Greece. Plato, of course, wrote about the republic. Democracy, a Greek word, demo, people. And then, of course, the suffix C-R-A-C-Y means rule, rule by the people. So this notion of dispersal of power, which has probably been perfected, I suppose, by the U.S. Constitution, at least in a sense, in that political power is spread very thinly in this country. And if you go back and read Hamilton and Madison and some of these people who formulated the Federalist Papers and the Constitution, you'll see that they refer back to the ancient Greeks and the ideals here on how political power should be organized. Language, our language, the English language, is suffused with Greek words. We use them constantly. I just mentioned democracy. Greek and Latin words are often, our words are derived from them. And we continue to use them quite often without realizing their origins. If you talk about literature, again, you go back to the Greeks. The conventions that we still employ in literature, the genres of literature, comedy and drama, plays, track back to the Greeks. You've heard of Sophocles and Aristophanes, the great playwrights. In philosophy, of course, you have Socrates and Plato, Aristotle. The epic poetry, we've all heard of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey. And of course the first historians, at least in the West, are Greeks. Herodotus, who wrote about the Persian Wars, and then later in the same century, you have Thucydides, who wrote about the terrible Peloponnesian Wars. If you study or are interested in arts and sciences, if you track it back, you're going to go back to classical Greece, whether it's astronomy or geography, cartography, biology, sculpture, architecture. Go to any city center in any urban setting in this country, and you will find at the courthouse or other buildings the classical Greek architecture, the columns, and other flourishes. So the Greek ideas of beauty and form and structure still live in our culture. So you can see, just through these examples that I've mentioned, the sort of central place that Greece has in formulating the Western world. Some time back, probably 20, 25 years now, a scholar, Martin Bernal, wrote a book called Black Athena. And in this book, he put forward the argument that the centrality of Greece in the formation of Western culture has been exaggerated, that indeed the Greeks borrowed heavily from the Egyptians and the Phoenicians and other peoples. And this caused a remarkable controversy within the academy. In fact, it created a whole sort of cottage industry of scholars, linguists, and historians, and just a variety of scholars who went after Bernal's thesis that attempted to diminish the centrality of Greece in Western culture. So this is a very powerful notion in the academy. We talk about medicine. Let's face it, to become a doctor, you take the Hippocratic Oath, do you not? And of course, Hippocrates is Greek. When we talk about cosmology, religion, myth, we constantly refer back to the Greeks. Let's face it, the Greek mythological figures, Zeus and Apollo, Diana, Demeter, Dionysus, Aphrodite, Hermes, Athena, these Greek mythological figures still live in our music, in our literature, in our art. You could Google any of these figures, Apollo. You could Google any of these figures and see endless depictions in art. And of course, they're also the basis for novels and music. So virtually any profession that you undertake in the West is going to have it's going to have Greek precedents. It's going to have those conventions that began in classical Greece 2,500 years ago. They're lasting. Now, let me see if I can describe how we're going to do these lectures on Greece. I think the first thing I'll do is talk about sources of unity and disunity among the Greeks. We're going to compare two of the primary Greek city-states. Key term here, of course, is polis, P-O-L-I-S, referring to the Greek city-state. And we'll talk about this in more detail. But we're going to talk about Athens and Sparta. Again, in a survey course, we have limited time. So we'll use Athens and Sparta as our examples. So we're going to talk about sources of unity and disunity. We're going to talk about specifically Athens and Sparta. We'll talk a little bit about the Persian Wars. And then we'll also discuss briefly the Peloponnesian Wars. And then we'll talk about Alexander and the influence of Alexander, his spreading of Hellenistic or Greek culture throughout the Western world. So here I'm going to end by just mentioning a few things that provide a sense of unity among the Greeks and disunity among the Greeks. Let's start with unity. First of all, language. They speak the Greek language. In fact, if you don't speak Greek, there is a Greek word referring to you. That is barbarian. Barbarian is a Greek term that simply denotes people who don't speak the language. So language unifies these people. Geographic proximity, this works both ways. It's both an element of unity and disunity. Greece is not a big place, but it is broken up. If you examine Greece on the map, it looks like a bomb went off and scattered Greece all over the Aegean and the Eastern Mediterranean. Islands, and the topography itself is dominated by mountainous regions and then valleys and then another mountain ridge. So even though Greece is small, it's a very rough country, sort of broken up. So this provides both unity and, I guess, a bit of disunity. The Greek people share in common the Homeric legends, the Iliad, the Odyssey, this sort of epic literature. They share the same myths. Hesiod's Theogony talks about the origin of the earth. It's a cosmological tale and introduces the Greek gods. And, of course, the Greek people from north, south, east, and west share in this sort of grand discourse. Greek theater, another source of unity, common conventions, common styles of how to perform theater. The Olympic Games, periodically the Greeks gather in one place to compete athletically. This is obviously a source of unity. The oracle at Delphi, where Greeks gather to divine the future. And so these are common sense factors of unity among the Greeks. Sources of disunity, there's no standard for weights and measures or calendars. In other words, each Greek city-state has its own peculiar weights and measures and calendars. This makes trade and travel problematic. We've already talked about geography, how Greece is broken up and scattered across the Aegean. Sources of disunity include the great political alliances of classical Greece, the Athenian alliance called the Delian League, and the Spartan alliance called the Peloponnesian League. This is a source of disunity because other Greek city-states are given a choice, essentially, of choosing one or the other, or playing Athens off of Sparta. And we'll see when we talk about the Peloponnesian Wars, how these alliances and the complications that ensue when the smaller Greek city-states attempt to play Athens and Sparta off of one another. So this is a good introduction, I think, just to get us started with Greece. Like I said, we'll spend a few lectures talking about Greece, but we'll leave it there for now and pick it up next time. Thank you.